Hey guys, welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Today I'm going to be reacting to the Templin Institute, Stellaris Invicta, the Antares Confederacy, and today's episode is called the Screk Empire. If you want to check out my previous reactions, remember I'll put the playlist at the top there. Just click on it and you'll be able to access them. Okay, let's start. 3, 2, 1, go.
No records have survived through the ages that reveal which leader or dynasty first laid the foundations of the Eternal Palace at the heart of the font of knowledge. For a civilization so overwhelmingly compelled by the desire to understand, to have their own history lost to them was one of many tragedies that shaped their ancient race. To ensure another lapse of understanding never occurred again, since the reign of the first emperor, every visitor who passed beneath its towering gates, every council that assembled within its graceful labyrinth, was dutifully recorded and preserved for all time. The history of the Screk Empire was reflected in these logs. They marked the passage of autarchs and regent councils, noted the conquests that built their hegemony and the terrible wars that laid them low. Nowhere in these endless accounts was an outsider ever permitted to enter the Eternal Palace. The greatest kings or religious prophets, the highest diplomats and anointed statesmen, no representative of the other races of the galaxy, ever saw what lay beyond its crystal steps. They never walked beneath the banners of the 10,000 surrendered nations, some so old they were thought by the younger races to be mere myth, and others that many alive today would still recognize. They never fully understood the breadth of the Screk civilization. But all that changed in the 9,000th, 900th, and 89th cycle of the last era, when the logs of the Eternal Palace lost their neutral, disassociated tone and grew resentful, bitter, and terrified. Hastily written logs remark on frantic meetings and evacuations. They describe that for the first time, the palace windows glow with the fires of their ruined capital, and the skies are filled by the silhouettes of enormous warships. The last entry of that vaunted chronicle tells of the arrival of another 10,000 nations, their leaders boldly striding beneath the banners of the conquered, their own flags not cast down in surrender, but raised high in triumph. No record has survived that tells of the foundation of the Screk Empire, but a perfect account exists of how it ended. Screk record-keeping, with rare exceptions, is notable for its reliance purely on the facts. First-hand accounts or opinions are most often discarded, and to outsiders, the history of their race can feel cold and dispassionate. Yet, in analyzing the extraordinary level of detail in
I would rather take perfect, detailed information over stories and jokes and caricatures and, how people would just recite history in a very entertaining way. I don't really subscribe to that. I would rather just go for the perfect, detailed, researched account about what happened on that particular day or the event or whatever else. So yeah, I'm okay with that.
their varied logs, it is clear that the Screk were once an intensely compassionate and selfless race. Millennia ago, they formed the center of something akin to the modern galactic community. The Screk were indisputably the most advanced and powerful race in the galaxy, freely offering their knowledge, protection, and wealth to the other species of that era. They took no part in the wars of smaller powers, instead offering mediation. Many of the greatest wonders, whose ruins can still be found on hundreds of worlds, are the forgotten legacy of the Screk. Most were intended to lift not only their empire, but every civilization towards a more welcoming, more peaceful galaxy. The gateway.
Okay, so they were the heroes of the galaxy. They were, the species that gave technology that chose diplomacy over war. You know, they were the all-fathers of the galaxy. All-fathers and all-mothers of the galaxy. So when did they turn bad? Let's hear.
A network was the greatest of these, instantly binding together even the most distant regions. The wormhole nexus was the Skrek's largest such endeavor, eclipsing even the power of the gateways. Had it been successful, the hyperlane network upon which galactic society relied would have been made obsolete, with even the smallest craft able to freely and instantaneously travel to anywhere in the galaxy. With the hundreds of millions of stars outside the hyperlane network now accessible to all, the competition for resources would end, and the era of discovery would last forever. After decades of promising work, dozens of successful tests, and seemingly no cause for alarm, the unthinkable occurred. An enormous tear split through reality itself, focused directly on a distant, uninhabited star system that was the center of the Skrek's testing sites. Entire planets, stars, and species from 100 different realities poured out of the rift in the moments before it stabilized, and then a form of life unlike anything else ever encountered. Malignant beings of pure energy radiated outwards from the rift, draining entire star systems of all biological life before moving on to the next. While the core Screk worlds were not immediately threatened, they mobilized their vast armadas to safeguard the civilizations that were. The war lasted for centuries, and with every star system lost and world purged, the Screk grew more desperate. The other, less advanced civilizations of the galaxy were no longer respected allies, but pawns sacrificed by the Screk to protect their own worlds.
I think the Screk always saw these primitive civilizations, or those that were, less than them in terms of technology, as, pawns. They didn't really see them as equals. Never. And even if they did, really, I just don't think the Screk Empire would have changed their posture and position towards them. I think they would still try to find a way to use them as a shield against the unbidden. So they were good, but only if it meant, it was to their advantage to be good. They weren't good just because they wanted to be good. No. Everything is to their own advantage. That's what I believe.
In a twisted betrayal of those they had intended to protect, the Screk developed a method of encasing entire worlds in unbreakable shields, intended to occupy the interdimensional invaders and delay their advance. When that failed, they drove slave armies against the foe, turning their own guns on any who dared retreat. The creatures that the Screk had come to know as the Unbidden were finally purged from the galaxy with the detonation of weapons derived from their original wormhole technology. The victory came at an immense cost. Trillions of lives had been destroyed, hundreds of planets left nothing but husks, and enormous sections of the galaxy could no longer be reliably traversed by any known faster-than-light propulsion. The Screk attempted for the next millennia to restore interstellar travel, but the hyperlanes had yet to reform. Even the conservative use of improved wormhole generators randomly snatched entire fleets of vessels from their intended targets. They were instead dragged towards the epicenter of the ancient detonations used to destroy the Unbidden, often desolated star systems, and left with no means of returning home. When the hyperlanes had finally repaired themselves naturally, and the Screk ventured back out into the wider galaxy, their civilization had been transformed. Centuries of war, followed by a millennia of hardship, had made their society cruel and unsympathetic. Where once the Screk had achieved wonders of art,
I think, like I said before, they were already cruel and unsympathetic. The way they used other civilizations as shields against the Unbidden, that's not something a benevolent and kind and all-knowing civilization that's meant to be the peacemaker does, So they were already evil in their own ways, so, yeah.
science and industry, Now they lorded over a multitude of slave races, the descendants of those they had once worked with as partners. The rule of the autarchs, who had guided Screk civilization since the fall of their first ancient dynasties, was crippled. So much of their society had been automated that as systems failed, the councils and institutions meant to fulfill their role only added to a growing labyrinth of confused and scattered groups known collectively as the leadership caste. Informal agreements and feudal sub-empires came to drive their civilization. What little central authority remained instead lay with the archivists. But this group, one of the only such organizations to survive the collapse, had become so insular that their directives were often incomprehensible. Orders were given to worlds that had long since been lost, demands made on civilizations the Screk had already conquered. In a crushing blow.
So the font of knowledge was not their true capital. The archivists who live on the planet Archive, that was their true seat of power. The font of knowledge was just a front, saying that this is our capital, when in fact it was actually the Archive. Okay, that's interesting.
To their national pride, other races less constricted by the failure of the hyperlane network had claimed large territories of the galaxy in the Skrek's absence. A series of wars were launched against their new rivals, the Vran, the Tizru, and the Banthurians. But in each instance, the Screk were forced to sign a humiliating armistice. With the will to expand their crumbling empire gone, the Screk instead turned further inwards, endlessly recounting the details of their lost triumphs and hoarding whatever knowledge remained privileged to them alone. Entire generations passed without even meager attempts at innovation. Screk society regressed further, with even much of their own technology growing beyond their understanding. The sole exception was their study of the unbidden. Since their near extinction, the Skrek's ruling caste had grown obsessed with the idea of alternate realities. In the deepest reaches of a world they named the Archives, their scientists developed a rudimentary means of observing them.
I like this artist image here, the artist impression of what that device would look like, probably. The device that would pierce into different universes and see what's going on and how those universes defeated the unbidden. I like it. I like this device, this spherical device here. That's cool.
The images and data they received was splintered and often impossible to decipher, but over the course of centuries, they pieced together fragments of tens of thousands of realities. Some were indistinguishable from their own, others so different as to defy comprehension. With the events of the outside galaxy now beyond the concern of the Screk, they stood idle as their old rivals similarly fell into ruin, and new races rose to take their place. This cycle seemed poised to repeat itself until, with unprecedented boldness and without any prior indication, the Screk sent a fleet of warships across the galaxy to an otherwise unremarkable and primitive world its inhabitants had named Earth. Why the Empire chose to do this, and how its various ruling families had for the first time in recent memory come to act in unison, remained unknown to the general populace. It was believed, however, to be in some way related to the unbidden, with evidence seemingly pointing to their imminent return. The destruction of the nation-states.
Okay, so they probably chose Earth, or should I say humans, as their weapon against the unbidden. But the question is, why humans? Why Earth? I mean, we are not the strongest beings. We didn't have the technology required to defend ourselves. So I just don't understand. Like, they had slave races before they came to Earth. Why weren't they worthy of becoming that sword and shield against the unbidden? Why is it humanity? Why is it Earth?
Present on Earth took minimal effort, and in only a few years, the indigenous humans had become another slave race within the Empire. Yet, while most slaves would have been sent to the labor camps scattered across their territory, the Screk utilized humanity in an entirely different manner. The United Terran Protectorates were afforded a type of limited self-government, and strenuous efforts were made to conceal the Skrek's initial invasion and win the loyalty of their client race. They even shared their technology, constructing the means by which their new Terran satellite nation might assemble enormous industrial and manufacturing centers. Yet, while they were generous with much of their technology, they were puzzlingly strict with other resources. As if they were following some guide known only to them, the Screk separated the Terran citizenry into tiers, restricted basic rations, and even water. They were divided into numerous regional governments and encouraged by the Screk to fight amongst one another. Many of the Screk leaders were themselves confused by the seemingly random orders given to them by the masters of the archives, but they implemented them without question. The Screk sought to mold humanity into a society of their own design, but what design that might be remained elusive, perhaps even to them. Whatever experiment the Screk might have been performing on humanity reached a higher stage when it ordered its United Terran Protectorates to embark on wars of conquest across the galaxy. Strengthened by Screk technology, dozens of races were conquered. Yet while the younger nations of the galaxy, and even their ancient rivals, could not directly challenge the combined strength of the Screk and their Terran servants, resistance to their campaigns began to rise from an unexpected source. The Confederate Republics of Antares were dismissed as simply another trivial alien nation when the Terran Protectorates delivered news of their existence. The concept of a Screk nation-state had deteriorated so dramatically that by the time what passed for their empire's leadership caste began observing Antares in earnest, the Confederacy had grown to become a formidable power, one even capable of rivaling the Screk themselves. That the Antares Confederacy had not only survived but endured in their corner of the galaxy was a shock to the Screk, one that shook their empire to its core. What the Confederacy referred to as the miasma was thought by the Screk to be completely uninhabitable. It was avoided at all costs by their ships, although only their archivists could say why, and the knowledge was not freely shared. What the archivists did reveal was that the presence of what was at its core, a free human nation, could not be allowed to exist. By the time the Screk ordered the extermination of the Confederacy, a preemptive strike by Antares was already underway. The Screk had believed that the first confrontation would occur near the human homeworld of Earth, and the invasion...
I thought the same. I thought they were going to attack Earth first. But really, the Antares Confederacy took a big gamble by attacking the Screk Empire first. And it paid off half of it. Because it did work. They did conquer the Screk Empire. But the United Terran Protectorates became the Greater Terran Protectorates in the end of the war. So ultimately, they failed at achieving their goal. But still, very, very interesting how the Antares Confederacy just decided to attack the elder race instead of their client race.
Of their own worlds was seen as impossible. The loss of the archives and the mass suicide of its attendants separated the Screk from their last governing institution. When the Font of Knowledge was itself the target of Confederate landings, their empire was already gone, replaced by warlords and tyrants clinging to whatever fleets and armies remained to them. Many fled to the Terran Protectorates and were given refuge there, only to be slaughtered in their hundreds by Terran officers, their severed heads and limbs dangling from the banners of a new Terran empire. When the first Confederate troops entered the Eternal Palace, the Screk leaders who remained, those privy to only a fraction of the atrocities their kind had committed, expected a similarly gruesome fate. Yet, perhaps the greatest victory Antares ever achieved over the Screk, the one that would lead to the eventual reconciliation and cooperation between the two, was that the Confederacy acted with mercy and restraint. While acts of vengeance did occur, and countless scenes of violence and savagery were recorded across the ranks of the Confederate armed services, they were severely punished by their superiors. Such a benevolent act astonished the Screk. To see their technology, their fleets and armies, their entire worlds overcome by the Confederacy was ultimately inconsequential in the face of this display of moral superiority. It was an act that...
Yeah, to think that probably they thought that the Screk Empire was the only right force in this galaxy during that time when they were the superpowers. They must have thought that, no one could ever challenge us, no one could ever conquer our font of knowledge and our archive world and any other worlds that we have. Like, we are the all-fathers of the galaxy, and no one is going to challenge that hegemony. And here they are, the Antares Confederacy have come, and now they're being humbled by the Antares Confederacy. Something they probably never thought would ever occur in their entire existence. Because they've been through it all, they've done it all, they have experienced it all, and for the first time in a very, very long time, they've been surprised, they've been humbled, and now they are standing in awe of the Antares Confederacy.
The Screk recognized they might have been incapable of themselves, even at the height of their lost empire. For the first time, they began to understand the weakness and frailty of their own society. In the face of Antares, they had become irrelevant. In reading the terms of their species' surrender, the Screk were humbled further. Their people would not be exterminated, and no acts of vengeance would befall them. Their cities would be rebuilt, and their society allowed to grow. In seeing all the rights that would be afforded to them as citizens of the Confederacy, the highest remaining individual within the Screk leadership caste is said to have muttered, "If they can forgive us, they will be the greatest nation in all reality." The mutual effort to rebuild Screk society began as a timid endeavor between the Confederacy and its newest citizens. But in time, this partnership elevated all those it touched. The ancient knowledge of the Screk improved countless lives across Antares, while the font of knowledge and its sister worlds again roared with the spark of industry, commerce, and innovation. Through the Confederacy, the pride of the Screk was restored, and the stain of their brutal history overcome. But the single question that the government of Antares wished answered before any other was beyond the knowledge of the Screk who had survived. The purpose behind the invasion of Earth, why humanity...
I like this image. I like how the sun is behind the Earth and it's creating this halo effect. It's a nice image.
...of all species in the galaxy had been targeted. This knowledge had perished with the last archivists. Even today, Confederate scientists have scoured the endless collections of data within the Screk archives, hoping for some clue to this lingering mystery. Tragically, this information was once present there, only to be destroyed during the Confederacy's liberation of that world. In their study of alternate realities, the archivists had sought the means to reverse the fortunes of their fading empire, to find a way to resist the unbidden, whose return they knew was inevitable. But they found something far greater, far worse. Countless civilizations across countless realities had fallen prey to the extra-dimensional invaders, and what few victories had been achieved were done so only at great cost. These victors, like the Screk, were drained of...
This is GTU music, isn't it? GTU-themed music. Yeah.
So much of their power that they were doomed to extinction, just as surely as if the unbidden had triumphed. But in one reality, something else had occurred. It took centuries for the archivists to coalesce this information, but the details revealed to them were terrifying. Their species had long ago given up a belief in what humanity might have named the Devil. But in this other reality, they saw it given form. They saw a race much like their own, yet entirely different, stumble through a gateway upon a world of vast oceans and great continents. They saw a slaughter play out there, with skies filled with ash and rivers turned red by blood. They witnessed corpses branded with the mark of evil, and victorious fleets and armies bearing that same emblem cast 1,000 worlds beneath a shroud of darkness. They witnessed an entire race burned and shattered in an act of ultimate vengeance. Even the unbidden, in all their multitudes, were powerless before this raw expression of might, their own invasion driven back, and annihilated. What had doomed the Screk and a million other races to a slow extinction was to this vast nation merely an inconvenience. The archivists had realized
the GTU did not drive other species to extinction. They absorbed them into the Empire, and thus they became Terrans as well, part of the Greater Terran Union. But I guess maybe to the Screk, that just proves that, they were put to the sword and they became extinct. They don't really understand the concept of absorbing peoples and cultures and making them, or should I say molding them into your own Terran society or Terran citizen. So they just think that these other empires were just brought to ash and the entire civilization brought to extinction, which is not the case. And also the Screk didn't really analyze how the Greater Terran Union came to be and why is it so militaristic, why is it so prone to war more than diplomacy. They also didn't understand why the GTU destroyed an entire planet. If they understood why the GTU is the way it is, then maybe they would not have made this mistake about attacking Earth in their universe.
That the species they had witnessed, the one destined to create this empire, existed in their own reality. The Screk had at their command the ability to destroy it, to ensure that the power they had witnessed in the multiverse, or something like it, never emerged to threaten them. But they decided instead to attempt to control it. The United Terran Protectorates were a pale imitation, a means by which human destiny could be twisted to serve the Screk. Too late, the archivists realized that in seeking to control that power they had feared, they only served to give it a different form. A new colossus that arose from imprisoned lightning, divergent yet equally supreme. In studying the facets of the multiverse, the Screk brought on themselves the very fate they had sought to avoid. Had they searched deeper, studied longer, they might have realized that those realities were becoming increasingly linked, and that the boundaries between them were weakening. But nowhere more so in their own reality than on a world where millennia ago, the Skrek's wormholes had collapsed, and the Unbidden had been unleashed. A world known to the Confederacy as Nakiska.
This video was based on the events of Stellaris Invicta Season 2. In 1 hour from the time this video was published, we'll be holding our final livestream of the series, and the journey of the Antares Confederacy will come to a close. To join us for that final stream, a link to our Twitch channel can be found in the description below.
Well guys, that's it with the Screk Empire. The Screk Empire didn't learn enough from the GTU universe. To them, they just saw humanity in the GTU universe as the epitome of evil, eviscerating other civilizations and just destroying and committing genocide, which is not actually the case. The GTU absorbed all those people and their cultures and their technology and their way of life and adapted it to the GTU. And the GTU just grew stronger from that. They didn't have to destroy other civilizations and enslave them like how the Screk did to Earth and to all these other civilizations in their universe. They just brought them into the fold. They made them their equals. They gave them the traditions that is the GTU. And that's what made the GTU strong, is that it was a very xenophilia empire with a military outlook and military tradition, and that's what made it survive. Now the Screk Empire, they just didn't see that. They just saw the GTU being a very evil and domineering and supremacist kind of empire that destroyed other civilizations. And that's what they tried to prevent the Earth in their universe from becoming. But there is one very important thing that they missed, is how the GTU was created. It was created because of how the Tyrum invaded Earth. They invaded Earth, they destroyed this civilization, they almost brought humanity to the brink of extinction. Now that is something similar to what the Screk are doing to their universe, Earth and humanity, where they've also destroyed Earth's civilizations and brought them almost to the brink of extinction. It's just that, you know, they are using them as slaves, where the Tyrum were just going to make them into becoming more Tyrum, I think. Yeah. So that was the mistake. That's where it began. And the Screk did the very same thing by creating the United Terran Protectorates. They could have talked to the humans, they could have negotiated with the humans, they could have shared technology with them, and, you know, make them independent, leaving them alone, let them be themselves, and when the time comes, then they could join forces to fight against the Unbidden. But they didn't do that. They were just thinking about the GTU and this perceived monster that would destroy their civilization. So yeah, the Screk Empire didn't really do their homework on the GTU. They didn't really understand why the GTU exists, and ultimately it has led to their own downfall as well, where now their monster becomes a even far more dangerous rogue monster that is just doing its own thing without its master's control. So yeah, the Screk Empire is interesting, you know, how it has gone through so much, and because of that it has made the entire civilization very jaded, negative, isolationist in a way, and arrogant, and they just don't really care for anything that's not Screk, and that has also led to their downfall. Yeah, Screk Empire was interesting. It was interesting. I wonder what's going to happen now, since the Screk Empire no longer exists and the people are now part of the Antares Confederacy. The Unbidden are back. The only weapon, or yeah, I can call them a weapon, the only weapon the Greater Terran Protectorates is not going to be there to help out against the Unbidden. They're doing their own thing. They're not focusing on the Unbidden. So I'm just wondering what's going to happen next. And this device that can pierce through into other universes, that's amazing. That is just an achievement beyond all other achievements. I would even say it even surpasses that ambition of them creating a wormhole drive that could have instantaneous travel to other solar systems. That device would have been amazing if it worked out properly, but this one, it takes it. Okay guys, that's it for today. Remember, if you liked the video, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I will see you next week. Okay, bye bye.